study that evaluates the impact of the ongoing wave of elite immigration, mostly to Western countries, and how that impact, what it's doing with respect to national security calculations. So this isn't about human security in as much as he's looking at out-migration of China with respect to the Chinese state. And specifically, the paper looks at these recent trends of immigration with members of China's educated and professional classes. Spotlights things like the flight of talent, the outflow of wealth, departure of members of the elite who are privy to different kinds of state secrets. The paper also pays attention to the fact that certain types of immigrants may, however, help to further China's national interests, so looking at the flip side of it. Also, the paper analyzes the importance that the administration under President Hu Jintao has had on strengthening, or in some cases the lack of strengthening, of the country's human resources, and how they need to look at that seriously for a way to discourage out-migration in the coming years, as well as to lure overseas Chinese back to the country. The conclusions looked at the relationship between international competition for talents and China's perceived deficit in soft power. So that's basically what the paper's about. Starts off looking at immigration waves, and Dr. Lam gives an overview of three different waves that he identifies, bearing in mind how he opens the paragraph. A popular internet writer caused a stir when he asserted in mid-2010 that, in quotes, all Chinese who earn more than 120,000 yuan a year want to immigrate, end quote. So that apparently caused a huge upsurge of talk in the country. But he writes, most worrying for the CCP leadership is the fact that despite widespread publicity given to the supposed viability of the China model, so, you know, the idea that Chinese will stay in the country because that's where the action is, that there are growing numbers among Chinese elite who have chosen to leave the fast-rising quasi-superpower for the West. China became the biggest worldwide contributor of immigrants in 2007, and according to official Chinese media, 65,000 Chinese secured immigration or permanent residence status in the US in 2009. Figures for Canada were 25,000 and 15,000 for Australia. Goes on to say that in the wake of the financial crisis, more Chinese students were expected to stay on after getting degrees and professional qualifications outside of China. Among the 270,000 Chinese who went to foreign universities as self-paying students in 2009, only 25% were projected to return to China upon graduation. Goes on to argue that the middle class and affluent Chinese are taking advantage of liberalized travel regulations to give birth to children in the US and other Western countries. And the size of the Huaqiao, or the Chinese diaspora, estimated at more than 45 million by the Overseas Affairs Office of the State Council, is expected to grow, continue to grow. So the out-migration, according to those figures, is real. Goes on in the third section to look at immigration and national security, and talking about the communique of the fifth plenary session of the 17th CCP Central Committee in October of this year, where it was cited 2 times as the goal of building a country with superior human resources and talents, and how that was that dialogue, or the discourse of promoting human resource and talent had been taken up at the Central Work Conference on Human Resources in Beijing earlier in the year. So that there is a recognition by the government that there is a need to provide an environment for keeping people at home. It reminded me of Singapore about 5 years ago, creating a bohemian section in Singapore as a way to offer a place where people could go and talk about ideas over coffee in the evening, because the out-migration of the brain drain, because of the stultifying, or perceived, I guess, by the intellectual community, the stultifying climate there. And I thought, well, this is interesting. China's now going to attempt to keep their intelligentsia at home. It goes on, the paper goes on about the outflow of the talents versus the relative number of returnees, and indeed suggesting that there is a problem. The largest group of immigrants consists of professionals and experts with middle-class background. Made me think, again, this probably has something to do too with the receiving countries, that countries such as Canada aren't necessarily taking in very large quotas of poor people from countries, but are allowing people that are able to offer something to their new home. So, okay, continuing on, exodus and wealth. To quote some of the figures, in the past decade, immigrants from Zhejiang, known as a haven for private business, took with them at least 60 billion yuan assets overseas. And that there's a suggestion that apart from opportunities of developing their businesses in different markets, red capitalists have cited the hate the rich mentality in China as an important reason for them to leave the country. So, making money in China is no longer good enough if they don't have the ability to enjoy their wealth, I guess, publicly. So they're leaving. And of course, taking wealth with them also, according to Chinese Academy of Social Sciences scholar Xu Yu, who said that the damage is not as obvious as a fire having destroyed a warehouse. He said businessmen are in a position to make great contributions to the economy and social life through running enterprises. Now they have left the country, so they're taking their money with them, but it's also the projection of business that is not staying at home. The paper goes on to cover the leakage of state secrets and how, I thought what the most interesting part of this was that mid to senior ranked cadres, particularly corrupt ones, who have gone abroad certainly belong in the category of immigrants who are knowledgeable about state secrets. So that you get in trouble at home, you can apply to go abroad. And in fact, Deng Xiaoping's family were some of the first batch of Chinese elite to have settled in the US. Not that I'm putting Deng Xiaoping in the category of corrupt cadres, but it happened to be in the same paragraph, that's all. Goes on to say by the end of 2009, an estimated 4,000 corruption-tainted cadres had gone abroad. Each of them reportedly spirited away illicit fortunes worth at least 100 million yuan. Yet much more serious than the funds is the fact that these bad apples may be recruited by foreign intelligence services, sometimes in return for receiving protection from persecution. Ways in which immigrants can work for the motherland. He talks, Dr. Lam mentions how, in quoting economic geographer Annalie Sa Shen-Mian, calls brain circulation, where you have immigrants that have worked in, say, the high-tech sector in Silicon Valley, being able to bring transfer of IT knowledge to the home country. And he cites the case of Taiwan, having done that successfully in their country. The actual lobbing of overseas Chinese with respect to political scenarios, and again, a good example was the Olympic Games, and how you had Huaqiao associations in US, Britain, and in France helping to drum up support for the Games. So that internal, and we had many articles in our press with respect to the Olympics, particularly around Tibet, the Tibet issue, the pro-Tibet issue, and we had overseas Chinese in Canada speaking out on behalf of the momentous occasion of the Olympic Games in China. The paper goes on to talk about the mid to long-term national plans for the development of talents. And it talks about the 1,000 Talents program, which was established in January of 2009 as a way to lure back some of these people back to the country. And basically, it's been a failure. As of mid-2010, central government units have only attracted 600-odd high-caliber experts and entrepreneurs under the 1,000 Talents program. And the people that have returned haven't given up their overseas passports or their green cards. So the suggestion that they might come home for a while, but they're going to hedge their bets and hang on to the option to exit again if they want. The conclusion of the paper, Dr. Lam cites a 2010 article that was put out by Xinhua News Agency entitled, "The United States is Co-opting Elites from Around the World." But as the author, Ran Weiss, suggested in his article, he saluted American soft power, particularly the country's ability to attract gifted personnel from different countries. Apart from the allure of top-notch universities and cutting-edge high-tech firms, Rand cited institutions and systems that encourage gifted people to achieve breakthroughs. He quotes, "America puts a lot of stress on the rational use of human resources and on retaining outstanding personnel. Much emphasis is put on the free flow of talents and the abolition of restrictions and discriminations," which actually really brought to mind Canada and how we had this slashing of funds for R&D in our country. And then we're surprised when our professional people decide to go south. Well, there it is. Yeah, so China apparently is facing the same problems. I'll read you the last paragraph. It's short, don't worry. It is significant that in its policies regarding keeping homegrown talents as well as attracting, watch out, Chinese authorities have given top priority to hardware such as salaries, promotion prospects, and seed money for starting new ventures. Yet until the CCP leadership is willing to pay more attention to software, particularly modernizing and democratizing social political institutions, the wave of immigration is expected to continue even as China narrows its gap with the US in terms of conventional yardsticks, such as GDP and military might. And as long as the outflow of irreplaceable personnel continues, not only China's economic development, but the country's national security may be put at risk.